Breaking news that we wanted to let you know about, and having to do with Karmelo Anthony. And the breaking news is this. We understand that his legal team is now seeking a new judge. So he was convicted more than a year after Austin Metcalf was stabbed to death at a Texas high school track meet. That is when a jury convicted Karmelo Anthony of murder and sentenced him to 35 years behind bars. The case, which started as a confrontation between two teens under a Team 10, then grew and became very controversial. It drew intense public scrutiny and competing claims of self-defense. So Anthony is now serving his sentence, but his legal team is also preparing an appeal.
The silence lasted only a few seconds. Then the screaming began. On an ordinary spring afternoon at a high school track meet in Frisco, Texas, hundreds of students, parents, and coaches watched in horror as a confrontation lasting only moments ended with a 17-year-old athlete collapsing onto the ground. What had started as a dispute beneath a team tent became one of the most divisive criminal cases in recent American memory. Within minutes, first responders were fighting to save the life of Austin Metcalf. Within hours, another teenager, Karmelo Anthony, was under arrest for murder. The tragedy itself shocked the nation. What happened afterward divided it. For months, investigators gathered evidence, prosecutors built their case, defense attorneys argued self-defense, and millions of people debated every new development online. When a Texas jury ultimately found Karmelo Anthony guilty and sentenced him to decades in prison, many believed the legal battle had finally reached its conclusion. But it hadn't. Only days after the verdict, Karmelo Anthony's parents stepped into the national spotlight for their first major interviews since the conviction. Fighting back tears, they insisted their son had not received a fair trial, rejected the label of murderer, and argued that the justice system had failed their family. They also questioned aspects of the trial, including jury selection and witness credibility, while their legal team prepared an appeal. Those interviews immediately ignited another firestorm. Supporters saw grieving parents refusing to abandon their child during the darkest moment of his life. Critics saw a refusal to accept the jury's verdict or acknowledge the devastating loss suffered by Austin Metcalf's family. Across television broadcasts, podcasts, social media, and comment sections, emotions boiled over. Every statement was dissected. Every appearance generated headlines. Every opinion seemed to deepen an already painful divide. Yet beneath the outrage was a reality impossible to ignore. Two families had already lost everything. One family buried a teenage son, whose future ended on a track field in an instant. The other watched their own son leave the courtroom in handcuffs to begin serving a lengthy prison sentence after being convicted of murder. This is not simply the story of a controversial interview. It is the story of the moments that led to one irreversible decision. The investigation that followed, the courtroom battle that captivated the country, and the interviews that reignited a national argument over justice, accountability, grief, and truth. As we begin, remember that while emotions surrounding this case remain deeply divided, the facts established in court, the public record, and verified reporting will guide this story. Where competing claims exist, particularly regarding the appeal or allegations about the fairness of the trial, they will be presented as claims, not established facts. Because before the headlines, before the interviews, before the backlash, there was a single moment beneath a tent at a Texas track meet that changed countless lives forever. If you're drawn to carefully research true crime stories that separate verified facts from speculation, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Long before courtroom headlines and televised interviews turned their names into national talking points, Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony were simply two teenagers with futures still being written. Austin was known by friends and family as a dedicated student-athlete who embraced competition with determination and discipline. Football, track, and academics played a major role in his life, and those closest to him described a young man who valued teamwork and pushed himself to improve every day. Like many high school seniors, he was looking toward graduation and the opportunities that lay beyond it. Karmelo Anthony was also a student-athlete with ambitions of his own. Those who knew him described him as talented and driven, with dreams that extended beyond high school. Before the incident, there was no widely reported history suggesting he would one day become the center of one of Texas' most closely watched criminal cases. On the day of the Frisco track meet, both teenagers arrived expecting nothing more than another athletic competition. Hundreds of students from different schools filled the stadium, creating the familiar atmosphere of school spirit, friendly rivalry, and anticipation. No one could have imagined that a brief confrontation would forever alter so many lives. Following the fatal stabbing, investigators gathered witness statements, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence to reconstruct the sequence of events. Prosecutors ultimately argued that the evidence supported a murder conviction, while the defense maintained that Karmelo Anthony acted in self-defense. Those competing narratives became the foundation of a trial that captured national attention. Before we continue, if you appreciate carefully researched true crime stories built on verified facts rather than rumors, please like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on notifications. The deeper this case goes, the more complicated the truth becomes. In hindsight, people often search for warning signs that might explain an unthinkable tragedy. But in this case, investigators found no evidence of a long-running feud between Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony. According to testimony and public reporting, the two teenagers were not known to have an established relationship before the day of the track meet. What unfolded appears to have developed rapidly during the event itself. As investigators pieced together witness accounts, they focused on the moments leading up to the confrontation beneath a team tent. Several witnesses described a disagreement that escalated within seconds, while accounts differed on certain details. As is common in fast-moving, high-stress situations, the central question became whether the encounter could have been diffused before it turned deadly. During the trial, prosecutors argued that the confrontation did not justify the use of deadly force. The defense, however, maintained that Karmelo Anthony believed he faced an immediate threat and acted in self-defense. Those opposing interpretations became the defining issue for the jury, which had to weigh physical evidence alongside eyewitness testimony. Outside the courtroom, another kind of tension was building. As the case gained national attention, social media transformed it into a cultural flashpoint. Clips, rumors, and selective interpretations spread rapidly, often outpacing verified information. Supporters and critics formed strong opinions long before the trial concluded, making it increasingly difficult to separate established facts from online speculation. By the time proceedings began, the case carried enormous public pressure. Every filing, every witness, and every legal argument was scrutinized. Yet despite the noise surrounding it, one undeniable fact remained. A teenage life had been lost, another teenager faced the possibility of spending decades in prison, and countless families, classmates, and community members were left grappling with the consequences of a confrontation that lasted only moments. The next stage would reveal exactly how that confrontation unfolded, and why it became the center of such intense legal scrutiny. The confrontation unfolded with startling speed. What began as a disagreement beneath a team tent during the Frisco track meet escalated in a matter of seconds. Witnesses later described a tense exchange between Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony, though their recollections differed on some details. That would become a recurring theme throughout the investigation. While everyone agreed a confrontation occurred, not every witness remembered it exactly the same way. According to evidence presented at trial, the encounter quickly became physical. Prosecutors argued that the conflict did not warrant the use of deadly force and that Karmelo Anthony intentionally stabbed Austin once in the chest. The wound proved catastrophic. Coaches, spectators, and emergency personnel rushed to help as chaos spread across the track meet. Despite life-saving efforts at the scene and later medical treatment, Austin died from his injury. The entire incident lasted only moments, but its impact was immediate and irreversible. Students who had arrived expecting a day of athletic competition instead found themselves witnessing a scene of unimaginable trauma. The event was halted, families rushed to the stadium, and investigators secured the area as a homicide scene. As detectives began reconstructing the sequence of events, they collected surveillance footage, interviewed witnesses, and documented physical evidence. Prosecutors would later rely on that evidence to argue that the stabbing constituted murder. The defense, however, maintained throughout the case that Karmelo Anthony believed he was acting in self-defense during a rapidly escalating encounter. That claim became the central issue the jury was asked to evaluate. By the end of that day, one teenager had lost his life, another was under arrest, and two families found themselves forever connected by a tragedy that could never be undone. The questions surrounding those few seconds would dominate the investigation, the courtroom, and eventually the nation. In the hours following the fatal stabbing, investigators moved quickly to preserve every piece of evidence that could explain what had happened beneath the team tent. Unlike many true crime cases, there were no allegations presented at trial that Karmelo Anthony attempted an elaborate cover-up after the incident. Instead, the investigation centered on determining whether the use of deadly force was legally justified. Crime scene investigators photographed the area, collected physical evidence, and documented the positions of those involved. Detectives interviewed students, coaches, staff members, and spectators who had witnessed all or part of the confrontation. Because the incident occurred at a crowded athletic event, investigators had numerous accounts to compare, though not every witness remembered the sequence of events in exactly the same way. Authorities also reviewed available video footage to help establish the timeline. Medical evidence regarding Austin Metcalf's fatal wound became a critical part of the prosecution's case, while attorneys on both sides carefully examined the physical evidence alongside witness testimony. Investigators worked to separate confirmed facts from conflicting recollections, knowing that even small details could influence the outcome of a murder trial. As the investigation progressed, prosecutors concluded that the evidence supported a murder charge. The defense, however, continued to argue that Karmelo Anthony acted in self-defense during a rapidly escalating confrontation. Ultimately, it would be up to a jury to decide which interpretation was supported by the evidence presented in court. The case attracted extraordinary public attention, with social media often amplifying rumors that were never established in court. For investigators, the challenge remained the same from beginning to end. Follow the evidence wherever it led, regardless of the noise surrounding the case. If you appreciate fact-based true crime coverage that separates verified evidence from online speculation, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on notifications. In the next chapter, we'll examine the courtroom battle, the jury's decision, and the sentence that brought one phase of this case to a close. When the case finally reached the courtroom, the events of that afternoon were examined in extraordinary detail. Every witness statement, every piece of physical evidence, and every second of the confrontation became the focus of intense scrutiny. Prosecutors and defense attorneys presented sharply different interpretations of the same incident, leaving the jury with the difficult task of determining whether the fatal stabbing constituted murder or lawful self-defense. The prosecution argued that the evidence showed the use of deadly force was not legally justified. Through witness testimony, forensic evidence, and the timeline established during the investigation, prosecutors maintained that Austin Metcalf posed no threat that warranted a fatal response. They asked jurors to focus on the facts presented in court and the legal standard required to establish self-defense under Texas law. The defense countered that Karmelo Anthony reasonably believed he faced an immediate threat during the confrontation. Attorneys urged the jury to consider the rapidly unfolding nature of the encounter and argued that their client's actions should be viewed through the perspective of someone reacting in the moment rather than with hindsight. After hearing the evidence and receiving legal instructions from the court, the jury deliberated before returning its verdict. They found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder, rejecting the claim that the killing was legally justified as self-defense. The judge later imposed a lengthy prison sentence in accordance with the verdict, marking the conclusion of one chapter in a case that had captured national attention. Although the trial had ended, the legal process did not. Defense attorneys announced their intention to pursue post-conviction relief through the appeals process, arguing that legal issues raised during the trial deserved further review. An appeal is not a new trial or a determination of innocence. Instead, it asks higher courts to examine whether any significant legal errors occurred that could have affected the outcome. As those proceedings continue, the conviction remains in effect unless overturned by an appellate court. The jury's verdict brought a measure of legal closure, but it did not bring peace. For Austin Metcalf's family, the conviction could never replace the son they lost. They had spent months reliving one of the worst days of their lives through investigations, court hearings, and testimony. Every photograph shown in court and every description of the events forced them to confront the reality that Austin would never graduate, build the future he had planned, or return home. Their public statements reflected a family still carrying an unimaginable weight, expressing gratitude for the verdict while continuing to mourn a loss that no sentence could erase. Karmelo Anthony's family faced a different kind of heartbreak. In interviews following the conviction, they maintained that they believed their son had not received a fair trial and continued to support his efforts to appeal the verdict. Their comments sparked intense public debate, with some viewing their actions as those of parents standing by their child, while others criticized the interviews as a failure to acknowledge the jury's decision and the devastating impact of Austin's death. The reaction extended far beyond the courtroom. Across the country, the case became the subject of heated conversations about self-defense laws, accountability, juvenile violence, and the influence of social media on high-profile criminal cases. Online platforms were flooded with opinions, many based on verified court records, while others relied on rumors or incomplete information. The sheer volume of commentary often made it difficult to distinguish established facts from speculation. Within the Frisco community, the emotional scars remained visible long after the headlines faded. Classmates, teachers, coaches, and families were left trying to process how a routine school sporting event had ended in irreversible tragedy. For many, the case became a painful reminder that a single decision made in seconds can reshape countless lives, leaving wounds that neither time nor a courtroom can fully heal. Months after the tragedy, the headlines continue to evolve. Appeals may be filed, legal arguments may continue, and public opinion will almost certainly remain divided. But beneath every new development lies a truth that has never changed. One teenager lost his life, another lost his freedom, and two families were left to endure unimaginable grief. The story of Austin Metcalf and Karmelo Anthony is more than a courtroom battle or a viral news story. It is a reminder of how quickly ordinary moments can turn into irreversible tragedies. A disagreement that lasted only seconds became a criminal case followed across the nation, leaving behind questions that many people still struggle to answer. As with any high-profile case, emotions have often overshadowed verified facts. Throughout this investigation, we've focused on what was established through the legal process, while recognizing that the appeals process exists to review potential legal errors, not to retry the case in the court of public opinion. Whatever happens in the future, any changes to the verdict or sentence will depend on the courts and the evidence presented through the legal system. Perhaps the most haunting part of this case is not the controversy that followed, but the lives that will never return to what they once were. Friends who gathered for a track meet will forever remember that day. Families who expected to celebrate milestones instead found themselves navigating unimaginable loss. A community that came together for competition was left united by tragedy. What do you think this case teaches about accountability, self-defense, and the consequences of decisions made in moments of anger? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you found this documentary informative and appreciate carefully researched true crime stories built on verified facts, please like this video, share it with others, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another investigation. Until next time, remember that behind every case file is a real person, a real family, and a story that deserves to be told with care, accuracy, and respect.